everyone, and welcome to Critical Conversations, where it's two guys talking about politics and discussing things in a measured and reasonable way. I'm Jared Bessie, and this is my co-host, Sam Castles.
Hello, hello. Episode 3.
Episode 3, here we are.
Rolling
Thank you guys
around.
for sticking with us so far and listening. It's been fun. So
It's been great. I'm super excited for today's episode.
yeah, it's
really
going to be really interesting. I've done a lot of reading, and I think it's going to be really fun. Do you want to give a tease of what the topic's going to be today before I do some news?
Yeah. So we talked about a little last week. We're talking about Kamala Harris today, trying to figure out where she is on the whole political spectrum. We've heard a lot of different takes, and we'll get a little bit more into why we chose this topic later. But yeah, if you want to help us jump in with us and figure out where she actually stands and how much is hype and how much is real, then we're going to try to figure out as much as we can in 40 minutes anyway.
Yes, I think it's going to be exciting.
Okay, Jared's taking us away with some news for today.
Yeah, so kind of some of the big talking points these last couple weeks. After this comes out, it'll be a little later, but has been both of the Democratic convention and the Republican convention. And I haven't watched a ton of it, but I've been reading about some of the different things that have gone on. I've watched a little bit of some of the Democratic speeches. Right now, the Republican convention's ongoing, so I haven't watched a lot of that yet. But Trump officially accepted the nomination today. But I was perusing through the news, and I saw what I thought was a really interesting article on Politico that was basically talking about how that Trump isn't running on a platform anymore. And it was comparing his 2016, where he had a clear outline of like, okay, here's what he was trying to do. He was going to fight China. He was going to build a wall. He was going to do all these different things. But now in 2020, it's just kind of like, we have to stop the Democrats from winning. And I think it was interesting that I thought, like, also watching some of the Democratic convention, it was kind of saying the exact same things, but on the opposite side, right? It's this, we're going to have to elect Biden just so that Trump isn't elected. And they have both sides have some platform. It's not like they're just have zero platform. They talk about a lot of things. But I think it is interesting that we're not having those same talking points that I feel like we did in 2016. Anyway, I just thought that was really interesting, and I think it speaks to the rise of negative partisanship in that we just have this idea of we just have to beat the other side. Doesn't matter what our side stands for anymore.
Right. And I think something we had talked about a little bit was something the right wing has always been accused of doing. The GOP is they're more of a reactionary party. They're
right.
Like as a alleged conservative branch, they're more what they do is say no or like
right, which is the principles of conservatism. It's like maintaining the status quo and like staying back to typical principles. So I get that there's never going to be as much of a platform there, but there's still a ton of things to do. The things that often are what the article is putting up, often the Republican stances, small government, cutting budgets, cutting tax, like all of these kind of things have kind of fallen by the wayside and aren't really talking points in this election. Anyway, so I thought that was really interesting, and we'll have to see as the convention goes on. Like maybe that'll
maybe it'll change. There's a little bit more to be seen. This is being filmed on 8/24, so
and I think as debates happen, like the people are, the moderators are going to ask specific questions about different policy stances, so that will kind of become more clear. But that was just the main news for the last couple of weeks. So
it's been all convention talk.
So speaking of the convention, the big stuff at the DNC was obviously Kamala and Biden, this Harris ticket, and
headlining.
That's kind of the new big stuff. And so I think we wanted to just take some time and like look into her past, because as soon as she was announced, it was headlines were flying everywhere, right?
Crazy.
yeah, from conservatives saying she's the most liberal person ever to be on a major party ticket, which may or may not be true. Then everyone on the far left saying, well, she's, not anywhere close to what we would want in a vice president with
Right.
Biden on the ticket.
Right. And then you had, more like moderate, like maybe CNN and New York Times praising her as like the perfect moderate. So it's like
Right.
It's really fascinating. Like, okay, well, we're having a lot of different takes here.
Yeah.
It's obviously to the advantage of the right to try to paint Kamala Harris as a far extremist left wing. You got to motivate your base.
Right.
You want to win those independent centrist voters over to your side. And then, I think the progressive left will, like, they're always sort of fighting a little bit with the more moderate wings, so they are very hard to please, like, I think a lot of times, and they weren't happy either. So it was interesting for me kind of noticing, like, oh, these things are conflicting. Like, the progressive wing doesn't seem happy, but yet I'm seeing a lot of the right wing commentators saying that, oh, she's totally a radical progressive. So
right. No, for sure.
Something's up.
Right, which is exactly what we wanted to do this show for, was to find these things where there's this disconnect and talk about it.
Right. So yeah, we'll kind of jump through Kamala Harris's history a little bit, sort of transition into her more campaign era beliefs, and sort of talk about how do we actually sit down and quantify where she is.
Right.
That'll be the goal.
Yep.
Yeah. Should we
jump
into it with some basic facts about Kamala Harris?
Yeah. So Kamala was born in Oakland, and so she's lived in Cali most of her life, or all of her life probably. She is a former AG of California, so she worked in the AG's office. She was former AG, and she was a San Francisco district attorney. She was an assistant DA, and then she became the official DA of San Fran, and then has since been a senator from California since 2016, which a lot of that has been her running for presidency and now running for vice president.
Right.
Her mom is from British India and her dad is from Jamaica, so it's a kind of a cool. She's got two different ethnic backgrounds, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah, both first for vice president nominee, I think.
Yeah. Something interesting. She went to a historically black college. I don't have the name of it here, but I thought I'll be
able to find that. Howard University.
Yeah, I think that's right. And then she grew up going to both a Black Baptist church as well as a Hindu temple, kind of showing both of the different sides of her growing up years. And I thought that was really interesting. Yeah. I didn't read much more about her religious views, but I think they're not very prevalent in her modern day. But I thought that was really interesting growing up.
Yeah, I'd be interested to know, like, what she actually believes. It's really hard with politicians.
Yeah.
Because they always want to make sure they seem religious or spiritual in some way. Mm-hmm. And if you can somehow adhere to two religions, like, why would you not check both of those boxes?
Right. I remember reading an article. I was told in one of my poli-sci classes, the only thing worse than having killed somebody as a politician is being an atheist. So that's the only thing American people like less. So it's pretty
seriously
crazy.
Oh my gosh.
Yep.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, sounds like she had quite the diverse background.
Yeah.
I had a quick question. I should definitely know more about this, but we say AG, Attorney General. How does that, like, what does an Attorney General do? Because I know it's related to law enforcement, but it's different than, like, Chief of Police. Like,
I think, it's basically this, like, person that serves as a legal advisor to the government. So it's kind of a cross between, it's like a super high level attorney, basically, I think.
Got it.
And
so you have, like, your, like, state attorneys,
Right. They have
DAs, district attorneys.
Yep, they're responsible for a lot of the law enforcement, prosecution, responsible for legal practices in general. A
So
lot
they
of
don't actually do legislation, but they are in charge of like enforcing it or
not
arguing for it, right?
yes, I think so because I think they have. I mean, I think they hold a lot of power to persuade, and so I think they can champion different legislative
Right.
processes.
Because I'm jumping a little bit ahead here, but I know that Kamala Harris has always personally said she's against the death penalty,
Right.
but the death penalty was legal in California during her tenure as the district attorney or this attorney general, and she fought to uphold that and like didn't undermine it in ways that people who are not for the death penalty, that made them upset because they're like, oh my gosh, you personally don't believe this, but you're also fighting for it. And it's like this awkward position because she's not a legislator like in this
Right.
position. She's there to enforce the law, and that's kind of what her stance was, which I thought that was just like an interesting switch to go from attorney general to senator. Like there's definitely a different
Yeah. It's
aspect.
definitely a little different section, but I think this is something we'll probably come back to because we were talking about this earlier. But she seems to be a very political animal in that she knows what to say to do the right thing or to get the right things done. And so I think a lot of maybe some of her stance on the death penalty was that like it would have been not bode well on her to try to abolish the death penalty in California. So she makes
Right.
a stand saying that I'm not for the death penalty, but not actually do anything about it, which is true
Right.
of so many politicians.
So many politicians, sure. That's like politics 101.
Yep.
Okay.
And we'll come back to that, especially as she gets into her presidential stint run.
Yeah. And so something I think the last little background fact, we're trying to like establish the facts, is that she became a senator in 2016.
Yep.
So she has not been a senator very long. I mean, 4 years.
No, looking at like her national track record, at least, there's not a lot. I mean, there's not a lot to look at. We'll definitely
go ahead.
About that a little bit, but yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So that was one of the first things we noticed as we started doing research was, well, if our goal is to nail down where she is on this political spectrum, the first thing that kind of hit us both was, okay, well, she like really hasn't been a senator that long.
Right. So if you look at something like GovTrack, which is specifically tracking the amount of bills and things signed and amount of like, that's what it's using. So her run as senator is what's going to have defined her place on the GovTrack. Right. So we talked about this last week, but that was one of the things that made us interested is that she's the third most left leaning according to GovTrack.
In 2019, 2020.
Yes.
And then like there were previous years, 2017 or 18, where she was like the furthest.
Right.
Again, and so that was really
something like Bernie Sanders is like the farthest left right now, but obviously he's been on the Senate for forever, so it's like he has a much longer track record to be voting for these kinds of things, as opposed to not been there very long.
Right. But yeah, that was one of the first kind of pieces of information that the right was pushing out, like look at this GovTrack. I saw it circulating a lot of right-wing Twitter, stuff like that, where it was like, look, more progressive than Bernie, more progressive than AOC. Like, this woman's crazy. And like, obviously, a lot of that has to come down to she's only been there a few days, but we have to look into that and see like, okay, well, what does that mean?
Right. Right. Is that showing a trend or is that politicking? Yeah.
Right.
So.
Right. What were our big takeaways from looking a little bit further? Because I think even GovTrack founder or the guy who runs GovTrack was saying like, this isn't like the perfect tool to find out everything about someone's beliefs. It's just based on what they've sponsored and what they've co-sponsored.
Right.
So it's not going to catch all of the nuances.
Right. And I think this is kind of a point that I'll bring up now, but we'll probably come back to is she's a complicated person and like people are complicated people. And I think especially as you look at her background as a DA, like she is clear she doesn't easily fit into the boxes that we want her to fit in, or at least not yet. Um, and
Right.
so I think that makes her an interesting beast. So yeah, people are
Yeah,
complicated.
absolutely. Yeah. So I found this article from BBC. I'm going to go ahead and share it. It's a really good summary on basically little bullet points on each of the big issues of today. All right. You can see it okay, Jared?
Yes, perfect.
Fantastic. So, like I said, this is the BBC, and it's going to go through each major topic and
Yeah, major
talk about
topics
where.
just showing kind of where the BBC thinks she's at. So
Right. Yep. So it's just a good summary of where she stood in the past. Yeah. So police and race. We'll get a little bit into this later. Talking about why the progressive wing was so hard on her, especially
right,
in
I
this
think this is
particular
this is
area.
their main sticking point
So I
area
won't
for sure.
stick too much to this. You can see it's a bit long. I'm not going to read all of it, but basically she did longer than she's been a senator, right? She was working in the Attorney General's office as the Attorney General herself
Right.
in California, where she promised to be tough on crime, but she was a progressive. She always described herself as a progressive prosecutor. There were a lot of things that you can see even in the Senate where she's like, and Attorney General, where she's definitely like watching out for immigrants and different groups that might be more focused on by progressives. I know it's very vague, but
Well, I this was something earlier I found in the main research is that like she quit being an assistant DA over this Proposition 21,
right,
which was this proposition basically allowing juveniles to be tried in higher court, something that progressive, something that wouldn't. So it's this really tough stance on crime, as
right,
if you're under 18. And she's like, I can't support this, and so she actually quit over that. So she's definitely has
yeah,
some progressive, stances for sure.
yeah, absolutely. Um,
Yeah, and I think we'll come back to this
yeah,
kind of
we'll come
idea.
back to this a bit more.
There's an article that I want to talk about when we come back to
Right.
this. So
But health. So one thing that BBC notes is there's been a shifting opinion from Kamala Harris. So
yeah,
which has been interesting. Back before she probably knew she was running for president in 2017, she was one of the first senators to sign the Medicare for All bill,
right,
which, as we know, is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, progressive goals. Like if you look at the far left, Justice Democrat, like more Bernie Sanders, Democratic Socialist wing, Medicare
right,
for All is the heavy hitter. One of the first people to sign on to that. However, when she started campaigning, she definitely backtracked on that. And during the debates, I think she was not ready to go for a full Medicare for All. Instead, she's more where Joe Biden is. It's like we want to bolster the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare,
yeah. One of
and
my
go
one of the
ahead.
things that kind of stuck out to me when I was reading about her and specifically her, I went on her website for this kind of thing for when she was running for president, and it was clearly, I don't think it's one of her big issues personally. Like I think it's just something she hadn't thought about a lot when she decided to run for president. It was very late into her campaign after her big like bump in the polls that
Yeah,
she actually released her official plan if she was elected president, what she would do. And it was this weird combination. It was more progressive than Biden's, but less progressive, obviously, than Medicare for All.
right.
And it was kind of this figuring out, it was like 10 years they would pay it back, this giant issue, which which means it wouldn't even be paid back in her presidency. And so it was just these kind of weird things that didn't really track, which it didn't really actually
Right.
matter because that was kind of when she was dropping in the polls, and then she dropped out eventually.
Right.
So yeah, so it's definitely interesting to see.
Yeah. So I think partly like this can sort of explain where, okay, you can see how the right is going to jump on this fact, that she did sign on for Medicare for all, and then you're going to see the left get sort of upset that she waffled and came back, and like this kind of goes to almost like this rookie mistake in politics. Like if you waffle, you don't please both sides. Instead, you make both of them mad.
Right, especially in an era where everything's recorded and everything is talked about all the time.
Of course, yeah. They'll hold on to these facts forever, right?
Right.
So I think she did herself no favors, but it's, I mean, I know for a lot of it was a brutal cycle for the candidates for the Democratic presidential spot, and I'm sure a lot of their positions were just like, what's the way to get elected? We have to think a lot about electability, and you can tell probably with Kamala Harris, there wasn't, like you said, a lot of like historical thought. She probably didn't have strong opinions on this to begin with. So
feels like a very political issue for her.
Yep. Climate change, important to know, Ms. Harris was a co-sponsor of the Green New Deal, which obviously is a huge progressive movement that's big on Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's list. And again, you can see like this is probably why the right wing is she's gonna score on the political gov track like far left. Things like this, co-sponsoring Medicare for all, co-sponsoring Green New Deal, like those are not many senators were able to do stuff like that. That's definitely pretty far left.
Which is interesting, and I don't know how much of that is her position in California, being in a super blue state where she has the ability to do those kinds of things, whereas people in more swing states or purple states they can't sign on the Green New Deal because they'll get roasted by their constituents. And she's clearly not, or at least from my perspective, on either Green New Deal or Medicare for All, a leading member of those, like drafting those bills. She's a co-sponsor, but I don't know how much she's actually involved. So that's interesting as well.
Right. Yeah. But overall, I mean, opposes fracking. Is trying to get zero net emissions. Like this seems like a pretty progressive take on climate change. Again, I don't think the progressive movement has ever been upset with her on this issue. I think it's always been the cop stuff and probably Medicare for all. Gun control, I don't think I had anything hugely compelling here. Just sort of regular Democratic.
Typical Democratic regulations and
just tightening it, making guns a little bit harder to get.
Ban on assault rifles, pretty typical.
Right. Get those loopholes down. One thing to note is she said she was open to the idea of going even further and supporting a mandatory buyback, compelling owners of assault weapons to forfeit those guns. That's definitely a lot more progressive than your average Democrat. I remember like this sort of came onto the scene early in the campaign for her, and Beto O'Rourke was one of the first ones to be like that famous like, hell yeah, we're coming for your ARs, and sort of pitting himself as the super progressive there, which definitely
did not work out for him.
I don't think that the Democrats wanted to head that way with their platform.
Which again, this is a very political statement. I'm open to, of course, I'm open to the idea of something super left, so she can get both. She can have her cake and eat it too, basically.
Right, exactly. There's a huge difference between I'm open to it and co-sponsoring a bill for it. Because being open to it could literally mean, in reality, I'm not going to do that or sign on to it, but I can't publicly tell you I'm not going to do that. So that's that one's up in the air. But again, like these are the things that the right wing can hang on to, and yeah, I mean, not being willing to shut that down is definitely a stance, whether she wants it to be or not.
Yeah.
Yeah. Women's rights, I don't know a whole lot about the takes on either of this. I think this is all pretty generic stuff.
6-month paid lead is interesting.
Yeah, so
Again,
that's
it's kind of like a proposal. I don't really know.
right. I think this was on the debate stage where, yeah, she was saying 6 months, and Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, who tended to be like the more progressive candidates, were only saying 3 months.
Right.
But yeah, I don't think anything like really too crazy here. Sort of standard Democrat, more moderate, you know. And then immigration. The only thing, I don't know if it says it here, but she has gone on record and said, I don't want to abolish ICE.
Yeah, so that was one of the more interesting things. As I was watching a music video the other day, and it was this really dramatic, and it ended with, hashtag abolish ICE. And I'm just like, it's just such a ignorant statement. And I think when I listened to her speak on this, or a clip of it, and it was just like, she's like, yeah, no, I think it's something necessary. It's part of our law enforcement. It's part of something that is needed to keep our borders safe. But she's also probably going to be typical Democratic stance of, we need to have immigrants come in, and not going to be the right wing craziness that's going on now. So
yeah, I mean, I always wonder with abolish ICE. I mean, it kind of strikes me as like abolish police kind of thing, where it's like the people saying it probably don't mean like instantly do away with all of it.
It's true.
But yeah, it's interesting to see how that would look like. Does it mean abolish ICE? Does that mean anyone can come anytime? Like there's no, or does it just mean we have to do this in a different, like less militarized way? Or I don't know. I'm not really sure. Yeah. I don't think there's a structured like push behind that movement.
No, I don't. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, she's definitely been critical of ICE. She wants reforms, something like that. But I would not chalk it up to anything too radically left, or too progressively left, or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So I'll go ahead and
kind of loops us back around to talking about her stances on as a DA, and kind of like her more stuff that the progressive has an issues with, right?
Yeah, we kind of jumped over the cop section a bit.
Yeah, so let's circle back around to that.
Right.
Yeah, do you have anything you specifically want to start with? There's a couple options.
Yeah, I mean, I was probably going to talk about the video that I watched, so if you want to say anything before that.
No, go for it.
Okay, so one YouTube channel that I definitely tend to watch to get kind of a good pulse on the progressive left, the more democratic socialist, Bernie supporting type views, is this channel called Secular Talk. It's hosted by Kyle Kalinske. We obviously have really different political views, and I definitely disagree with most of what he says, but a lot of times I really respect how he goes across his points. I think for the most part, he has an ideology that he sticks to, and he's not afraid to criticize the right, not afraid to criticize the left. He'll criticize Bernie Sanders when he feels like Bernie's going about something poorly. He was really mad when Bernie came out and endorsed Joe Biden and things like that. So it's those little, what's the word I'm looking for? Admissions and that make me be like, okay, I feel like he's not.
Right. You may not agree with him, but he has a consistent worldview that it's hard to poke holes in his hypocrisy or his, whatever.
Yeah, or at least I can assume he actually believes what he's saying, and he's not just trying to spin it or whatever.
Right.
And I think a lot of his beliefs line up with a lot of what I see on like left-wing Twitter and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, like that sort of brand of Democrat right now.
Right.
But he had a lot of complaints. I'll go ahead and just like share the actual video. We're not gonna watch it, but this is the video I watched way back in January of 2019. He had a video kind of going through Kamala Harris's record, and he had some pretty strong critiques on a few of her positions. But his biggest takeaway, and I've sort of summarized them, wrote them down here, that really worry him as a progressive and make him believe that there's no way she can really be a progressive and is more of a moderate. So these are some of his complaints. So like we said, some of the, we've seen that she was a progressive attorney general. Like you said, she quit over the Proposition 21.
Right.
She's always kind of pushed for your left-wing policing policies in a lot of ways, but there were some ways that she definitely enforced the status quo in policing, which we know is very under fire in the left. So here are a few of the big ones.
Especially right now from the last few months.
Yeah. Not being pro body camera, there was a pretty serious debate, and there were times where she did not sign on to mandating body cameras.
Right.
She didn't used to be pro marijuana, so
which is a much bigger issue now.
Yeah, that's a big progressive left. We know Joe Biden I don't think he's pro federal legalization.
No.
Publicly. So, but of course, like Bernie Sanders, probably Elizabeth Warren, I'm not actually sure, are definitely legalizing weed. And part of it is, I think, just because they believe there's a lot of people who are put into prison just for, like, they call nonviolent drug attempts, drug arrests and things like that. So that's like a big no-no in the progressive wing. There's even this California 3-strike law where basically if you have 3 felonies, that's an automatic prison for life, which is not a progressive statement at all. Again,
that's harsh. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, these are Kyle's complaints, not mine, but he's sort of one of my good ways of getting a pulse for what the far left believes.
Right.
She has a history of siding with cops during wrongful convictions, basically meaning the way he phrased it, and was basically if the conviction is found out to be wrongful, but there was like paperwork messed up or something like that, she would tend to side with the cops and not push for that.
And I think it's interesting as a DA, and I mean, I don't know all what goes into being a DA, but you're often this representative, or when she was the attorney general, like for law enforcement and for those kinds of things.
Exactly.
So you have to be on that side. So that's kind of an interesting complaint because, like,
you're a lawyer, you have to argue your side, kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. She defended the death penalty even though she was against it personally. That's one of his complaints. She was a proponent of civil asset forfeiture. So I'd never heard of this, but basically, I'll have to look it up some more, but the way he summarized it was, if police believe you have an intent to do something like a crime or commit some sort of crime with something you have, it could be like a car, a gun, it could be money, like if you have a lot of cash or something on you, if they think you're about to do something with it, they're allowed to seize it. And the way he kind of backs up is like, this is sort of guilty until proven innocent. He said it's unconstitutional. So, like, again, this is like giving a lot of power to cops.
Right.
And I know that a lot of progressive, and I've seen a lot of back when the when she was a candidate against Joe Biden, I saw a lot of Black Americans taking big issue with, her tendency to be a cop, side with the cops. And I mean, especially the way we've seen 2020 go, there's a lot of critiques coming on police forces, and she has been sort of there fighting for police for most of her political career.
Right.
So that was big. A couple other small things he said, like she's not pro-Palestine, like that's obviously a big far left thing. Sort of the right tends to side with Israel on a lot of the Middle East conflicts, and the far left has sort of been pro-Palestine. So Kamala has historically not sided with them. So. So that's it. You should go watch his whole video if you want a more progressive. He'll go into more details on that. But anything else to say on the?
I just wanted to mention this. There's a USA Today article that is written by a public defender that worked this lady Nikki has been working as public defender for 20 years in San Francisco, and so she worked a lot against Kamala because as a prosecutor, she's the defender. But she wrote a really interesting article basically saying that Kamala was one of the most progressive prosecutors in San Francisco or in California in general. And I just thought it was really interesting to read a story from someone who had worked alongside her and knew, or at least had worked against her. And so, it's a really good article, and something that was definitely got to see that other side of her. So she was very I think a lot of the things aren't necessarily just progressive, but just good things. Like she was very strong on working against sex trafficking and human trafficking in California. And she had a lot of different initiatives go statewide and then just stay in San Francisco.
Actually, go ahead.
Oh, I think those kind of things is what probably led her to become a senator, because she was clearly a mover and shaker in California.
Yeah, absolutely.
What were you going to say?
I just realized I missed two more of Kyle's points. She was pro-criminalizing truancy, and truancy is if your kids miss school, the parent can be charged with a crime. So that is definitely not a progressive take, especially these days. And she was also anti-sex work legalization. And so that's definitely a progressive. There's a push for that in the progressive wing as well. So, so as we kind of step back and sort of take in all this information, it's hard, like you said, from the very beginning, one of the things we noticed, it's really hard to nail her down into this nice box, right? Obviously, there's more to politics than just a straight line, and people can be on one side on some issues and tend to side with others on the other. That's okay.
Right. And I think we are we want things to fit in our box. We want person to be easily on one side or easily on the other side, so we know where to talk about them or where to stand with them. But the reality is that's not the case, even as politics may be moving in that direction.
And I think the other big takeaway is like we said, she hasn't been a senator that long. A lot of it has been during the campaign, which obviously you're going to shift a little bit, especially as a politician.
Well, and the decisions you make as a senator reflect upon you, and so they're going to reflect upon your campaign. So it's all tied up in that.
You might be willing to co-sponsor Medicare for all, but when it comes time to run for president, you're like, is this something that's going to get me elected? Now I'm waffling on it a little bit, on Green New Deal. It's all very hard to nail down, and like we said, it just hasn't been there very long. So when I see all of these like right-wing statements that she's incredibly progressive, I'm definitely a little hesitant. She definitely seemed like she cooled her jets a little bit when it came time to actually pick a side.
Right.
On the other hand, she's definitely been open to some of the furthest left
Yeah.
policies, like pro Medicare for all, pro Green New Deal, and those are
Right. Which I can
huge.
understand them. Understand them. I can understand why conservatives are concerned with a track record like that.
Right.
For
Yeah,
sure.
that's definitely unprecedented for a presidential candidate to be for
Kind
co-sponsor
of
something like that.
a
But
last
yeah,
anecdote I wanted to kind of end with or say at the end
yeah.
was I watched this Stephen Colbert clip. I don't know if you saw it when she was talking to him about he was asking her like why did you flip flop? You were one of the strongest proponents against Biden in the election, and now you're obviously on his team. And she
Endorsing him.
right
Yeah.
and she basically responded and laughed and just said, well, it was a debate. It was just a debate. And I think that
Yeah.
shows her prosecutorial background. Like she will say what it takes to get the job done.
Right.
And that might just translate into how she runs politics. Um, I think that's a really illuminating point. So
Yeah. Yeah, you're exactly right. That is definitely a bit telling in the sense of she's a politician,
right,
and a lawyer, like
right,
two of the historically butt of the joke professions. But
yep,
yeah, so but it was really good. It's good to sit down. It'll be interesting to see how she behaves going forward. I think at this point she's just going to be signed on to whatever Biden and his crew have adopted. But yeah,
right. It'll be
if she
interesting to
doesn't
see
win,
if
it'll be
they're
interesting to see where she goes as a senator and all of that too.
yeah, and also I think as a vice president, you have the opportunity to have a lot of initiatives and to kind of do a lot of the things you want to do somewhere. Yeah. So if they win in November, it'll be interesting to see what kind of things she chooses to
Yeah,
pro- propose as a vice president. So it'll be
absolutely.
interesting.
Be good.
Uh,
All right. You got
yeah,
a
and I
fun
think
recommendation for us, or you?
I
Oh,
do.
you got one more thing?
I was just gonna say, I think at the end of the day, to encourage, have conversations about her, right? Talk to
Yep.
people, see what they think. Do a little research yourself, get to know who she is, because
Yeah.
who knows, she could be our next vice president. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
but yes, I do have a fun recommendation.
All right.
Something that I have been reading and thinking about this past weekend and this past week is this book called The 10,000 Doors of January by Alex E. Harrow.
Oh.
And it's a little bit different from what I usually read. I usually read a lot of fantasy, and this is kind of similar, but basically it's about this girl in early 1900s in like 1905, and she her dad travels the world like looking for these archaeological things or something. It's kind of unknown what he actually does, and she lives with this man who's kind of taken her and her dad under his wing. But as a little girl, she finds this door that leads to this ocean world or this other world, basically. And she becomes obsessed with this idea that there are doors to other worlds. But the reason I really like this book and what makes it more unique than just like a portal kind of fantasy story is it is gorgeously written, but it's basically an allegory for how stories work in our lives and the way stories take us as portals to other worlds. They're the doors that lead
Huh.
to other places. And
That's
it's
really
just
cool.
beautifully well written. And as a person who loves books and who loves a really well told story, it's really connected with me in that sense. So I definitely recommend it.
Nice.
So,
Cool.
of
Dude, thanks for sharing.
course.
All right. I think that's it.
All right. Next week,
Um,
we're not sure quite yet, but um, yeah, we'll figure it
we're
out for
up in the
sure.
air, tossing some ideas. But we'll let you
So,
know by the time we post this for sure.
yeah, for sure. And hopefully, we'll have a Facebook page up soon when this goes out. So please go like our Facebook page so you can stay up
Yeah,
to
we'll
date
link
with
that in the description.
our new episodes. We're on Spotify, so that's exciting. Be sure to subscribe and follow on subscribe on YouTube and follow on Spotify. So,
Yeah.
thanks for listening, everyone.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Bye.